What we're obviously all feeling right now is that we look outside our window and people aren't outside, and all of our favorite restaurants are closed. But when you think about the bigger stuff, the long-term supply chains, the international trade, we continue to see the president and others emphasize that trade is still happening. And I think on the other side of this, we expect some kind of a bounce back. We're starting to see some flashes of recovery happening in China. For more on just kind of where the global supply chain goes from here, let's bring in Aikiko Fujita, because Aikiko, I think there's a lot of anxiety in the U.S. looking both to Italy on what happens on the health side, and then looking to, I think, what's happening in China right now. Maybe that's a hopeful sign, but they were shut down for 2 months. And okay, if they're back at 80% capacity right now, that's all good and well, but this thing just started for us. So does that mean it's going to be mid-June before we're looking at the U.S. economy getting into gear?
Yeah, Miles, and I think there is an argument to be made here that, we shouldn't necessarily be looking to the Chinese timeline per se to say, well, that's how long it's going to take for the U.S. to bounce back. I've been reaching out to some contacts to get a sense of what this all means for the supply chain. And I have to say, it feels a bit like deja vu, given that we spent the last year talking about supply chain disruptions stemming from the U.S.-China trade war. One person I did speak to, the executive director of the Center for Global Supply Chain Management over at USC, he has been consulting with a lot of these companies, including the big hospitals, about where they can source their equipment from, their medical equipment from, and all fingers point back to China. And what I think is interesting in that conversation I had with him is that, he's saying essentially the bounce back that we're seeing in China right now is fueled by the outbreak that we're seeing globally. In other words, where you look at Italy, whether you look at the US, there is a huge need for medical supplies, as Anjali has been noting every day. And all of that production, a majority of it, it's still coming out of China. He puts the manufacturing capacity in China right now at 60 to 65%, which is much higher than what we heard from the executive director over at the Port of LA yesterday, who said, based on port activity, he puts that at just above 50%. Either way you see it, I do think it's interesting that a virus that originated in China, now a pandemic, is starting to help the Chinese economy bounce back, because they still have the capacity to manufacture a lot of this equipment in a very short amount of time. And so while long term, a lot of these companies are going to be looking at diversifying their supply chains, not putting all their eggs in China, so to speak, right now they're having to go back to China because that's where the capacity is.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.